looks like we are live. Um, Thank you so much for joining us for the Food Policy Debrief's third Substack Live, our second of 2026. We'll give folks a minute or two to join, and then we'll get into it. I'm really excited for our guest today, who is Dr. Katie Wilson, the Executive Director of the Urban School Food Alliance. Dr. Wilson has dedicated her entire career to improving access to healthy school meals for all children, presently serving as the executive director of the Urban School Food Alliance. She spent 23 years as a school nutrition director in 3 Wisconsin public schools, 5 years as executive director for the Institute of Child Nutrition, 2 years as USDA Deputy Undersecretary of Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services, appointed by President Barack Obama. Her career also includes serving on the 31st Standing Committee on Nutrition at the United Nations, leadership positions for the School Nutrition Association, including the national president in 2008 to 2009, serving on the board of directors for the international organization Eating City, and as an expert on a variety of nonprofit boards. Katie has shared her expertise domestically and around the world to those interested in the field of nutrition, child health, and school food service management. Dr. Wilson holds a bachelor's in dietetics, a master's of science in food science and nutrition, and a PhD in food service and lodging management. She has received many peer-nominated awards and is considered one of the top experts in school nutrition, and according to her, is the best grandma ever. Or at least according to her grandkids. So welcome, Dr. Wilson. We're so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Well, there is no shortage of topics to discuss. So as we always say at Food Policy Debrief, let's get into it, shall we?
Sure.
All right. So this month's edition of the Food Policy Debrief, we got into some of the weeds about school nutrition. So, we obviously heard your bio, but tell us a bit about your background in school nutrition and how that led you all the way to the Obama administration and the Urban School Food Alliance. I think a lot of people, when they think of school nutrition professionals, think of like the lunch lady. Sometimes that's a positive thing. Sometimes that's a not so positive thing. So what inspired you to get into school nutrition in the first place?
Well, it's really an interesting story, Will, because I actually was going to school in dietetics, got a bachelor's degree in dietetics. And of course, in those days, you learned to go to a hospital to be a registered dietitian. And I went to a hospital like everybody else, and I started to pass out. I could not be in a hospital. So I'll never come to visit you in a hospital ever, because the sights and sounds of a hospital, I pass out. So I called back to the university and I said, what do I do? This is crazy. I always wanted to be in dietetics. They said, come back and do a master's degree. So I did. And I was trying to do a graduate thesis. And when you want to do a graduate thesis, you just want to get it done. You don't really,
Yes.
you don't want to pay too much attention to spending too much time. Just get it done and get that piece of paper signed. So I was looking for a topic. And at that time in Menominee, Wisconsin, there was a registered dietitian who was a school nutrition director and in the town of Menominee, where the university was located. So they said, look, she's at the cutting edge of everything. Go up there and see what she has, any ideas for you to do a graduate thesis. And I did. And I went up there and I did the quality of a school lunch versus the quality of a lunch brought from home. And that was in the, late 70s, early 80s. And I will guarantee you that the outcome of that thesis is the same then as it will be now. And so that kind of introduced me to school meals, but yet it still wasn't something anybody talked about at the university level. You didn't talk about school meals at all. I didn't know anything about school meals. So went on my daily life and ended up teaching at the university and being a hall director. So I stayed on campus, but taught in the nutrition department. And then later on had gotten married and moved. And so I was applying for jobs everywhere, universities and schools and everything I could think of to get back into the workforce with my master's degree. And a district in Wisconsin had a brand new position as an assistant director open. And so I started there part-time for $6.25 an hour with a master's degree. That shows you how much they valued school nutrition. But it was the beginning. And once I got in, there was no turning back. I was so passionate. I had done some time in hospitals. And yet in a school, you could really make a difference before the illnesses happened, before the problems happened. And you were so flexible. You weren't at the whim of a doctor or, whatever the diet order was, or you were there to encourage kids to have a healthy lifestyle, to choose something different and make good choices. And so I absolutely fell in love with school meals. And it went on. I eventually took over 3 years later. I took over my own district where my kids were going to go to school, small rural district. Of course, in those days, you're young, you have this degree, you blow in and you think you're going to change the world overnight. And everybody
Mhm.
there said, "Are you crazy? We're not interested in change. We like the way it is," even though they were losing $40,000 a year in the program. And
Wow.
so, yeah, for a small rural district. And so I went in with a proposal to the district when I applied and said, I don't want to cook. I'll put a cook in each kitchen. I need to be an administrator and classified as an administrator. And here's my 5 year plan. I'll turn this program around in 5 years. Well, in 1 year, we put it into the positive balance. So, and it was simple food service management tasks. And so it was more than just nutrition. Nutrition you can look up in the book and you know how to find it. But it was
Yeah.
about food service management. And from there, I loved every bit of it. I thought I'm tired of being patted on the head and being called a lunch lady. It is a word you well know that I absolutely despise. I don't think it's endearing. I don't think we'll ever change the image of school meals if we don't start calling these people the professionals they are.
Yeah.
And I literally got patted on the head because I was in a small school district, but I had a master's degree. I was highly educated and highly experienced. So I set my sights on empowering my team and making sure we put small school districts on the map.
Mhm.
And it did get to the point where my superintendent, who joined his own professional organization, because I joined the School Nutrition Association then.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned a lot of my leadership skills. And my superintendent then joined his own association for
It started a
superintendents.
trend.
Absolutely. And he said to me one day, every time I go to a meeting, all I hear about is my school food service program. And I knew I had, there, good. I got there. I did what I wanted to do, right? Um, so we made that program something to be proud of. And it's a way of also saying that small school districts can do it.
Yeah.
There's no excuse. They can do it. But what happened in that district is that I went there with a different idea of what a salary should look like for a food service director. And he took a risk. That superintendent took a risk. And at that time, the school board was not in favor of it at all. It's just a cook. We don't need anybody here managing the
Yeah.
program. Well, just like any restaurant you go to, some you like a lot because of the management of that program, of that restaurant. You can go to the same restaurant in another town and it's not very good, but
Mhm.
it's about who's managing it. So they couldn't afford not to hire a professional. And we ended up putting them very much in the positive balance. We put in a whole brand new kitchen at the high school, and it just blossomed from there. From there, it was all about volunteering in my professional organizations,
Mm.
saying yes to a lot of things when you should sometimes say no, but always saying yes, opening up any door of opportunity I could get. And literally, it was a lot of hours of volunteering, both at the local, state, and then national level through the professional organization.
Mhm.
And then because of the things we were doing in our school district, in this small rural district, we started to win awards, even at the national level. We won a Chef's Move to School award before Chef's Move to School was even popular.
Mm.
We had chefs in our schools doing all kinds of great things. So USDA then began to recognize us, and we would win different awards through USDA, the Frozen Food Association, everywhere and anywhere I could. We tried to win awards about the programs we were doing. And I
Right.
say we because it took my entire staff to be empowered to do this and their excitement. The other thing we did is we put a line item in the budget every year for their training because notoriously school nutrition employees have no opportunity to be trained. So the
Yeah.
teachers all do, but the school nutrition staff, they go on their own time or on their own dollar.
Well, and often the teachers are required to, in order
Absolutely.
to have
Absolutely.
licensure and all of that, and the school nutrition professionals, if they get it at all, it's certainly not required.
Great. And now we have put the professional standards in place that came through the Obama administration through Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act. So, but way back then, I empowered my employees. We paid them. We did training in the school district. When teachers had an in-service day, my staff had an in-service day.
Mhm.
And every one of them was Serve Safe certified. They got to be School Nutrition Association certified. And we framed those certificates and put them in the cafeteria so that they were proud of
Mm.
what they were doing.
And it was something they
Uh,
could be proud of. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so it was really just a passion. I fell in love with it. I saw the real importance of what we were doing for every single child, irregardless of their family income, because that's how we do school meals. It's based on your family income, what you have to pay for your school meal, which is ludicrous. They come into a school building. They should just be a part of that should be part of the school day, because it empowers them in the classroom to be well nourished. So we empowered employees, and we then just became sort of a program that was really well known, and got the kudos that they deserved for the work they did. We also then began to notice a lot of small rural districts, private schools as well around us, that were really struggling, and we really felt we were only as good as everybody around us. So we started a small group of us in Western Wisconsin where we would help even the smallest school district and the private
Mm.
schools so that they could meet the meal pattern, so that they could get on bids with us. So we would go to a high school uh, uh,
Yeah.
library and help them order their USDA foods. We didn't charge them to do that. We did it because we cared about school nutrition.
Yeah.
So that was my beginning, and I absolutely loved it. And then I went to other districts. And then because I became involved in the School Nutrition Association and eventually ended up as national president, um, that led it to more things because you begin to get to know USDA and the folks at USDA. And so then at one time, then I got a phone call, and there's a training institute at Ole Miss, the University of
Mhm.
Mississippi, and so they said, look, we really need that to become a national institute like it's supposed to be. Would you mind applying and going down there as the executive director and sort of turning that ship around? It needs to be more than what it is.
I'm sensing a
And
theme in your career here about turning ships around, but we'll get to that.
yeah, you're right about that. And so I did. My youngest son had graduated from high school, and I came home one day and said, I'm moving to Mississippi. I'm going to Mississippi to go to the Institute. So, as executive director of the Institute, that's what we did down there. We tried to really first of all, let people know that we were there and that
Yeah.
that training was important, and it had to be, it's how people improve their own skill set is, the training. And so, was very involved there and got it very involved, very much at the national level, and really got trainers out across the country, and doing what it was supposed to be doing. And we put a training standard in place at the Institute. I mean, you aren't going to teach Nutrition 101 if you're not a registered dietitian, because you could get questions in that class that are not part of the curriculum that I
Mhm.
only want registered dietitians teaching.
Oh, you
I
don't
mean,
want TikTok influencers
no,
answering this?
that's not a great way to do it. When the Chefs Move to School thing started, USDA called us at the Institute and said, would you put a class together? Absolutely. So the next thing you know, we're putting the whole training together for Chefs Move to School. Well, if you're going to teach culinary classes, then you need to be somebody who's trained in culinary skills, not just a retired school nutrition director. It has to be
Mhm.
someone who has that background. And so did lots of really cool, fun things there. And then one day, I will never forget it. I was in Alaska doing a training up in Alaska, and I had a couple hours off, and I was in a museum, and my phone rang, and they said, "Hello, we are the White House Personnel Office. We're wondering if you'd like to come in and interview or talk to us about being Deputy Undersecretary." And I about died. I started to laugh. I was breathless, and I said, "Okay, who is this? Who's messing
Did
with me?"
anyone in the museum ask you to shush, because you needed to be quiet after
No,
that phone
actually, I
call, or
was
no?
quite quiet, Will. I was speechless. Nobody would believe that about me. But I said, "Okay, who's messing with me? Who's doing this?" And they said, "No, ma'am, we're really honest with you. We would really like you to come to DC and talk to us about filling the role as Deputy Undersecretary, on behalf of President Obama." And so I did. I went, and I've never so afraid in my life. But when they started talking about the fact that they needed somebody who cared a lot about school meals, well, you know better than anybody else that I can talk about school meals for hours. And away we went. And every single day I walked up those stairs in that building that was built during President Lincoln's administration, I pinched myself and said, "How did somebody from rural Wisconsin get here?" My first school nutrition program that I had my tenure in was only 1,700 kids, and I
Hmm.
spent 18 years there empowering that small district to do really well for kids. And there I was, but it was a lot of volunteer hours and a lot of yeses that got me there. So,
Hmm. That's amazing. And I think, that speaks a lot to, sometimes we need people like that in charge, people who have taken small districts and turned them around. There's a couple other follow ups I have just from your answer here. And one of them is you talked about how you went into dietetics at a time when it was primarily clinical in a hospital. And nowadays we see, the kind of food as medicine movement growing. We see a lot of focus primarily on, clinical practice, getting to people with diabetes, getting to people with hypertension, high cholesterol. But what I'm hearing from you is that really the school is where we should start with a lot of food as medicine. Is that correct? And what's your experience with that?
Will, you hit it right on the head. It's absolutely where we need to target because school meals serves two big purposes. One, it helps solve food insecurity because we're actually giving kids food and they're consuming food. And two, it helps solve nutrition insecurity or nutrition deficits, right? So
Mhm,
because we have a meal pattern, we know we have to serve a complete meal. And of course, then there's the whole issue of how it supports local communities if you do local production as well. But school meals definitely is teaching families how to do things. When we used to print menus, and I'm so sorry we don't anymore, because that menu was on every parent's refrigerator, every guardian's refrigerator. My grandchildren go to a private school up in Athens, Wisconsin, and their menu is on their refrigerator because they still print them. And it's
mhm,
wonderful because I can't tell you how many stories and how many of us in school nutrition would have the stories to tell you about parents that build their own meals around the meal pattern they see on a school menu. So
hmm.
when they see a main entree, a vegetable, a fruit, a whole grain, and a liquid milk, they then start patterning their own meals around that.
It's almost like
School
you've
menu.
given them a printed shopping list in some
Absolutely, you have.
respect. Yeah.
Absolutely, you have. And so I think, we've got into technology now and a lot's online, and I think we've missed something there because it did help people. And I can tell you a quick, funny story about a local director here in Viroqua, Wisconsin. She's a farmer, heritage farm, and she drove to work one day and saw this produce in the field. And she called a bunch of us that were all good friends here in Western Wisconsin, and she said, "We have to buy this produce. He's going to plow it under." And we all told her she was crazy. What do you want us to do with all that? Right. So she started farm to school before it was popular. Everybody thinks this is all new. We've been doing salad bars and farm to school since the early 80s. And so we did. We started buying this produce from this farmer. And then she started to do a produce of the month, an item of the month before all this was popular. And it literally she had eggplant one month. And the Walmart in town in rural Wisconsin called her and said, "Could you please let us know what your produce of the month is? Because we have people coming to the Walmart asking for eggplant, and we don't stock eggplant in Western Wisconsin."
Right.
So it makes a difference. School meals definitely makes a difference. And we've always shown kids what a portion is. Portion control is part of food as medicine. A portion control is part of the problem in the United States, not even necessarily our food, but the
Mm,
portions we get are so ridiculous.
yeah.
And in schools, we've always had portion control. So it shows children a visual of what that should look like. That's why the My Plate was so good as an icon,
Mhm.
because it did show you on a plate what
Yeah,
percentage of that plate should be, the different food groups. So
exactly.
food as medicine is definitely should be taught in schools. The problem too, though, is that we've removed a lot of the life skills classes, whether it's
Mhm.
home economics or consumer education or even the tech classes that they were doing where you changed your oil or changed a tire or whatever that was.
Mhm, mhm.
A lot of that is gone. So kids aren't learning to put a meal together. I've done a lot of work in the UK and in England. They have very strict nutrition standards as well. And they brought back culinary cooking classes. They're required at age 7 to 14 in all of their schools. So
What are some of the outcomes they're seeing as a result of that?
they are definitely seeing, they can do things differently there. They can take BMI, like body mass index. They can take dental carried records. They can get records, medical records, easier than we can, and they can take those kinds of metrics in school without permission. They're seeing definitely a difference in what kids are choosing in the school lunch line, in what kids are consuming in the school lunch line, and how kids are even engaging with the school nutrition employees there,
Huh.
asking for different things and wanting to be a part of, deciding menus. And so they've seen a
So
difference.
it's more
We
collaborative, as a
absolutely,
result.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think that's one of the things that, I've heard of, many school nutrition programs trying to, and especially, during Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act implementation, kind of trying to work with kids, but it's still kind of a tug and push and pull, tug of war situation. And I like that it's more collaborative because it's like, hey, I learned this in culinary class. Have you thought about this? You
yes,
know, and they're like, well, maybe I hadn't because I've just been heads down, like in spreadsheets trying to make, our meal pattern work at a certain cost, right?
right,
Um, so I like that it's really collaborative and that students have a voice in the process because of the skills they're learning in the classroom.
right.
Um, I know that my school was somewhat similar. My high school was somewhat similar in that, we had long gone to like, college prep. You better take all your AP classes, you better be in band or orchestra, etc. And then right before I got there, they started a culinary program, and it was huge because people were like, "Oh, I get to, learn how to cook and I don't get to learn how to do this at home." And it was impossible to get in, because the class filled up immediately. And I'd be interested to see 20 years later, whether that program is still going. And if it's, maybe there's some school food professionals that have come out of there. So who knows?
Well, I think
Um,
that that's a real possibility, and, there are a lot of high schools that are doing that. Los Angeles Unified has a huge culinary program, and they're actually doing culinary, showdowns right now around the state of California, and then they
oh,
wanna spread it
really?
national. The NFL is involved in it as well, and then these kids are developing recipes that are then showing up on their school menus. And so there are a number of high schools that are doing that, but LA Unified has been very active recently doing that.
That's really awesome. Well, I'm going to go back to our pre-written questions now. So speaking of the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act, during the Obama administration, you helped implement that bill. And at the time, it was pretty controversial. That feels like an understatement, especially around implementation. I remember hearing one of my home state congressmen, Robert Adderholt, talking about how you were starving the student athletes, and they were just throwing all this stuff that they didn't like away, and it was food waste, and it was starvation, and it was all these other things. But now, uh, how many ever years later, we are seeing a movement to improve school nutrition from the some of those naysayers and from the opposite end of the political spectrum
Yeah.
with the Make America Healthy Again movement.
Mm.
So, if you could give this Congress and this USDA, and perhaps also HHS, since they seem to want their fingers in it too, which is, I'd love for you to speak to some of those dynamics as well. If you could give them any one piece of advice on where to begin based on your decades of experience, where would you tell them to start?
Bring in the stakeholders. Put the school nutrition leaders at the table. Let us help you figure out how to get this done. And that was the mistake in the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. It was too much too fast. It was
Mm,
developed, the school nutrition people came in on the afterthought. It was developed, and I think that's how I even got there.
yeah,
The
because you were leading the School Nutrition Association at the
right,
time when it was being written.
that's right. But once again, the school nutrition people weren't at the table.
Mm,
And so we know the logistics of how to make it work. we can help make that happen. We can talk about timelines. We can talk about what it takes to get it going. School nutrition employees are just amazing at making things work. But you have to have the timeline. You can't flip it overnight. You also have to have something in place that educates students and staff as to what you're doing and why, right? So, starving athletes is a great example. The school nutrition program was never meant to feed an athlete at 10:30 in the morning, which some high school kids eat lunch at
Sure
10:30 in the
do.
morning.
Mhm.
It was never meant to make that last until they were ready to practice for football after school, right?
Right, right.
So that time to eat, when you have good whole food, you have to have time to eat it. There are some schools that have 10 minutes for lunch. That's
That's
crazy.
crazy. That's
And
crazy.
so, yeah, and so all of that has you have to look at all of the pieces. And if I could give them one piece of advice, and we recently spoke to the Senate Ag Committee staff. And I said, look, guys, there used to be an advisory group, and I happened to be on it many, many years ago when I was a director in that small rural district. Because of the things we were doing and getting noticed by USDA, I was asked to be on an advisory group that USDA had, and they would bring us to DC maybe once a quarter or if any big changes were going to be made. And
Sure.
they were all different size districts from all different states, all different rural, suburban, urban. And we were part of this small advisory group, and we would have a great conversation about how to put the regulatory piece together to make these things happen. And I'm telling you, it was a lot easier than just coming out of the White House or just coming from one of the departments.
Mhm.
The meaning is well. The well wishes, they all mean well. They all want to see kids healthier.
Of course.
It's always been a bipartisan issue. So, but it's the way we do it. And if you don't ask us that are in the field how to do it and how to make it possible, then there's going to be resistance.
Mhm.
So I think you have to we suggested that when we visited them in January, bring an advisory group back together again and let us help you think this through and how we can do it because we can. And in most cases, districts are already doing a lot of what HHS already wants. Our districts in the Urban School Food Alliance, they eliminated artificial dyes and flavorings a decade ago.
Hmm.
Every one of our districts has a prohibited list of ingredients that they no longer allow in their food supply.
Yeah.
So it's there. There's something called ingredient guide. Anybody can get it at ingredientguide.org. It's been out there for years.
Ingredientguide.org. Okay.
Yeah, it's a free reference for anybody to look at. And this is the tool we've been using for years to get better, higher quality, cleaner label food in schools. So bring the school nutrition people to the table when you want to make decisions about how this will work.
Mhm. I also wanted you to touch on a little bit, USDA is in charge of school nutrition, and in this administration, we've seen HHS talk about it a lot. Um, in your experience, is this unprecedented? And, you know, had this happened when you were at USDA, how do you think it would have gone over?
Well, I think HHS has always had a piece of this because, of
Mhm.
course, they care about the health and well being of the American people. So
Of course.
Um, there's always been an argument that school meals shouldn't be at USDA because of the USDA food system, and that it has some influence, right? It's they want to sell products. They want to make sure the American farmer is well represented. So, is
Sure.
does that have influence on what they're deciding? I don't know that ever has because we've always had really good nutrition scientists helping develop the regulations, and registered dietitians have always been there. Once Congress passes the law, then USDA staff writes the regulation. And so, but HHS has always had some part of it because of the dietary guidelines. And they used to take turns, USDA, HHS, and doing dietary guidelines and sort of being in charge of them. But then we have to follow the dietary guidelines in school meals. We're required to. And so it is one of the programs that the dietary guidelines has impact on. So the fact that HHS is more involved, I don't see a problem with that. They're working coincidentally together. But again, let's talk about the reality of this. Let's think this through. The whole milk issue is a really good example of this.
Yeah.
If you're a customer and we're on a per meal reimbursement, so we want
We're
customers
about
through
to
that
talk more
line.
about that. Yeah.
Nobody's forced to come through that line, and a public school does not have to have a child nutrition program. That's a choice. It's not required. So I want to serve my customers. So if they're asking for whole milk, then okay, that's okay. Let's put it on the line. But I'm so glad they didn't require it because we used to be required to offer it. The problem with that is that they didn't think it through or put school nutrition directors at the table to discuss the ramifications. Number one, it's very much more expensive than any of the other milks that we're serving. Number two, they put it in only for lunch, not breakfast. So now, as a school nutrition director, the kids can't get whole milk at breakfast, but they can get it at lunch. Now, you try telling a middle school child why.
Yeah.
You try telling a 14-year-old boy why. And so they're putting the school nutrition people in a very difficult position.
Mhm.
And then the whole thing of saturated fat, now you have mixed messages. You don't have to count the saturated fat from the milk, but you have to count everything else that's saturated fat. That's a
Right.
mixed message. So again, it comes to the fact of they mean well, but they're not letting us help them put it in place. And
Yeah.
that's where the struggles really abound to. So
One of the things you brought up was the expense of whole milk versus, non-fat milks. And, recently the December legislation you're mentioning, also includes plant-based milks like
mhm,
oat, almond, etc.
mhm.
And those can also be higher cost as well, right? Now some of that is due to, uh, people who are lactose intolerant or people who maybe for religious reasons don't, drink milk. But and so from that perspective, I'm a huge fan, but there's also that cost element. And so, speaking of which, one thing that a lot of people don't understand about the National School Lunch Program and most of our school nutrition programs is that it's a reimbursement program with thin margins. I mean, the most that you're getting is $4.71 a meal. So, how does this structure create disincentives for healthier options? And how are some school districts around the country dealing with this creatively? You mentioned that, the student is your customer. So how are school districts around the country dealing with these razor thin margins and changing requirements around what they have to serve while still encouraging young people to eat their meals as opposed to getting something from home if their families can afford it?
So it's a really, really difficult position that school meals are in. And it is a per meal reimbursement. Every single time that child comes through a line, whether it's breakfast, lunch, snack, after school supper, whatever, I have to identify that child individually. I have to identify what their family income is and identify what category they're in each time they come through a line. So 3 or 4 times a day sometimes, right? So this is crazy. We are spending so much money on this identification of who they are and what their income is. Let me go back to the UK again. They have a student count day in September, just like we do, an enrollment day. Okay. They have free school meals and paid school meals, although their poverty level is much, much lower than ours. You can qualify
Mhm.
much easier than you can in the United States. And so, because our poverty level is ridiculous, there's no way you can live on that poverty level. But anyway, so they do their enrollment, they do their the attendance list there in September on that day, and they are given all of their money for their free school meals for their 107 190 days or whatever it is they go to school. They're given all of that money up front
Hmm.
to do their program, to run their program. Now, if there's a big influx in students for some reason and all of a sudden, more students move into town or whatever, they can negotiate that and work with the government on that, throughout the
Sure,
year.
sure.
But they don't have to count. If that child is absent that day, they still have that money to put into the program.
Mhm,
It's part of you know what your budget is, you know how much you can spend, and you go and you run your program. So it's a much better way. We are spending, if we could take all the money we use to identify kids when they walk through my line and put it into fresh whole food, I could buy equipment to do more scratch cooking.
mhm,
It is unbelievable how much money we're using because we're so crazy about whether the child's income level is $2 more than what they think they should qualify for free school meals.
mhm.
Um, So that puts you into a really difficult situation. When you think about it, that $4 and really the average is about 460, 465 unless you're high free and reduced.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to pay your labor, your equipment, all your insurance, all your benefit. You have to pay everything out of that. So I have about $1.30 to $1.35 for food. Think
Yeah,
about that for a minute.
yeah.
And I have to serve 5 components a liquid milk, a fruit, a vegetable, a meat, and a whole grain. So a protein, not necessarily
Mhm.
meat, but a protein and a whole grain. I have to offer all 5 of those every single time for lunch. And I have about $1.35.
Yeah, and we made fun of the USDA secretary for saying you could make a meal on $4.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
try
crazy.
$1.30.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. Now, I know recently someone said, well, Japan can do it for 3. Why can't you do it for what you're doing? Well, in Japan, the federal government pays for the school nutrition employees. They
Mm.
don't have all the labor costs. The students are required in curriculum to participate in preparing, serving in the classroom, and
Mhm.
cleaning up the meal. It's part of curriculum.
Hmm.
So it's different. It's not, you can't even compare it because it's so, they don't have the same costs that we have. And so it has become very, very difficult. When you think of that price point and you want to do more scratch cooking, which we're all in favor of, but we don't have the infrastructure, that's a whole nother story. But think of the employees. When my employees walk in the door and I want to pay them a livable wage, and I believe in Los Angeles recently the school board passed a school board policy that they get like $25 or $26 an hour,
Mhm.
and that's hardly livable in Los Angeles.
Yeah,
But if I want to pay them a livable wage, I can't afford to have them standing there peeling a carrot when I only get $4.70 back for that meal.
right, right.
It doesn't work. So, and then it's also the micromanagement of the review. Now, we have a meal pattern, and I'm all for it. And when I was in the School Nutrition Association, I helped write nutrition standards that we proposed to USDA before the Healthy, Hungry, Free Kids Act. That's what it was based on. Okay.
Right.
And I'm all for nutrition standards, and I think we need to meet nutrition standards. But when you have the micromanagement of that review, when a reviewer comes to your school district, and these are stories that I've incurred, and they say to me, you have too many stems in your grapes. What? Because you have to have a half a cup of fruit or vegetable on that tray. Well, I
Okay.
put it, a half a cup is 4 ounces. Well, I was
Mhm.
putting grapes in a 5 ounce cup, and I was told that wasn't a reimbursable portion. Yes, it is. It's 4 ounces in a 5 ounce cup. So, no,
Right.
it's not overflowing. Well, there's too many stems in those grapes. No, this is mind boggling. We have stories of the reviewers coming in and taking homemade spaghetti sauce and rinsing it off in the kitchen from the noodles and weighing the noodles and then rinsing the meat out of the spaghetti sauce to weigh the meat to make sure you've got exactly 2 ounces. Now that's ridiculous. We don't
Yeah.
eat like that.
I was
But
gonna say persnickety, but ridiculous also works. Yeah.
these are horror stories that any state could tell you. Anybody in any district can tell you these kind of
Mhm.
horror stories. So because it's so micromanaged and you have to have exactly a quarter of a cup or exactly this, or you can't count it as a component of that meal that day, you are forcing particularly smaller rural districts with less staff, you are forcing them to buy prepackaged, pre-wrapped items.
Yeah, I mean, the incentive is towards things that are pre-measured, prepackaged, processed. Like,
Yes.
I think of, like,
Yeah.
when people are using MyFitnessPal or those, like, macro tracker apps. It's a lot easier if you can just scan a barcode as opposed to, "Oh, I measured half a cup of spinach and this in my salad," and
Right.
all of that. You're basically driving people towards ultra-processed foods that are easier to measure or
Absolutely, and they
pre-measured
have a
foods.
child nutrition label on them, and they're over fortified. They're fortified with everything that so they meet it. Yeah, you put them through a computer, and it's going to say it meets the nutrition standards.
Yeah,
But they have a child nutrition label on them, so I don't blame those people at all
sure.
because they will meet their meal pattern, and they have to meet the meal pattern to get their reimbursements.
Right.
So you've put school nutrition in the United States. We have put them in these tiny little steel boxes. And there's no room for creativity or versatility. Now, are districts doing it? Yes, there are districts doing fabulous cooking all over this country.
Mhm.
And not all states are like that, but that is kind of the norm of this sort of micromanaged review process. So if I want to get kids to try broccoli and I have all this wonderful fresh broccoli I've just steamed or roasted, if I give a kid a sprig of broccoli, I can't count that as part of the meal pattern. It
Mhm.
has to be at least a quarter cup, and they have to have a half a cup of fruit or vegetable, or I can't count the meal at all. So, with only that little bit of money, I can't afford to give them a little sprig of broccoli to try. I can't afford it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it is a difficult situation.
It's kind of similar to how low income households, if you were trying to get your kid to eat healthier and you're on a thin budget, you're not going to spring for broccoli. You're going to go for the mac and cheese that you know that they're going to eat. Right? And so it seems like both, low income parents and the school nutrition professionals serving low income kids are kind of, I like how you said, a steel box, right? Of just like you have no margin for error at all
Right.
and no room to experiment in a lot of these places. So how could you expect better outcomes? That kind of dovetails nicely into my next question because, we all talk about wanting scratch cooking. Healthy
Mhm,
Hunger Free Kids Act wanted more
mhm,
scratch cooking.
mhm,
Make America Healthy Again wants more scratch
mhm.
cooking. And apparently, according to them, that is the cure that will ail the cure that will cure what ails us in school meals. Sorry. But data from your former colleagues at the School Nutrition Association show that there are a lot of capacity issues, including equipment, staff training, and more. So, you know, when I think about some of the reforms and the price tag of some of those reforms, um, I'm thinking like, half a trillion dollars, $450 billion across the country. But beyond the dollars and cents, tell me more about the scope of what has to change in order to really have scratch whole food cooking in our schools and how some of your Urban School Food Alliance members are leading the charge.
Well, and they really are. In every single one of our districts in the Urban School Food Alliance, they have really done an incredible job of getting more and more scratch cooking going and buying more and more locally, and creating food hubs around them and figuring this out. One thing I want to go back to is the very beginning of this conversation we've had, and that is about having food service management experience. And that
Mhm,
is the creativity of being able to run a kitchen, not necessarily the nutrition component, but running a kitchen. And one of the examples is when I was at the Institute of Training Institute, we took a team down to the Virgin Islands and Guam 3 years in a row to help do some training.
mhm,
And one of the chefs, Jason Morris, he's out of Colorado, he's fabulous. He was part of our dream team that went down there. He was the chef we took. And he was in the kitchen working with them. Now, a number of these people were illiterate. They didn't know how to read or write. So the training had to be really hands on and on your feet. And he said to them, let's learn to steam some vegetables. And they said, well, we don't have steamers. And he turned around without missing a beat. And he said, you have a perforated pan and you have a tilt skillet. Come on, we've got a steamer. Let's go. So
mhm,
that's food service management. What do you have? So I want to start there. What do we have? What can we do?
mm,
Can we do the entire meal from scratch? Probably not. But a lot of our urban school nutrition from the Urban School Food Alliance, what they've done is they've realized what can they do. And
mhm,
so we started a partnership with the Culinary Institute of America, and next week is our fourth one in a row, where we send people from all the districts down there for a week of immersion of culinary training on plant forward meals. And most
mm,
of it is side dishes. They do use tofu and some plant based other proteins
proteins,
as
yeah,
well. But what they're doing is learning how to teach adults culinary skills.
mhm,
When a chef comes in, my brother is an executive chef. He could not come into a school kitchen and teach cooking because he's a Hell's Kitchen chef. Um,
yeah,
who better
yeah.
than the people that
Yeah,
teach
I don't think
adults?
school nutrition professionals are used to yelling, "Yes, chef."
That's
Yes.
right. And so,
So,
who
yeah,
better to teach adults culinary skills than the people that teach adults culinary skills? And so this is a 5-day immersion class, and they learn all kinds of culinary skills, but they train the trainer. So they can go back to their districts and they can train their districts on a regular basis. It needs to, these one and dones, these chefs that are running into schools, teaching one day and leaving, forget it. It's a waste of money. Don't do it.
yeah. Or the
You
Jamie
need to
Olivers who blow
yeah,
in
you need people
and,
in, yeah,
you know,
and don't
mhm,
criticize what they're already doing. They're only doing the best they've been asked to do.
mhm,
So you go in and you have these people that are already their peers. They work with them every day, and they have the ability then to every day help. rehome those skills, because that's what it's going to take, is to rehome those skills. The other thing is don't blow at people. You want it all at once. Let's start with a couple of side dishes that we
Mhm.
want to scratch cook. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see the acceptability of that. What do we have in culturally appropriate
And
foods?
by
That's a great way.
acceptability, you mean are the kids eating it,
Are the
right?
kids eating it? You're right.
Mhm.
Cultural relevancy to this food. That's a great way
Yeah.
to start scratch cooking. So I say take it in small steps and let's start with what do we have? Because absolutely, these kitchens, I know someone who has like $500,000 worth of equipment in storage because when they sold her the equipment, she didn't know to think about the size of the doors in the building. Doesn't go through. None of the equipment, there's no power in any of the buildings that these pieces of equipment can get plugged into.
Yeah.
These schools don't have the power going to the building. There's just not enough power. You can't cut a cord off of a piece of equipment and put on a 110 plug-in, which some
Well, I mean, you
custodians like to do.
can,
You
but
can if you want to blow the
that
place up.
yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
but
Yeah.
so there's a lot that would have to be invested in. I was in a school in Kansas City, Kansas, when I was at USDA. 700 kids in an elementary school. They had no kitchen whatsoever. They had an illegal combi oven in a closet. So they were heating some things. The rest of the food was being brought from another kitchen. They had to put tables in the hallway. That's where the kids ate. So a lot of these schools don't even have cafeterias or kitchens. Or we were just in one of our schools as well on the East Coast. And the kitchen for the elementary school was literally a 6-foot table underneath a stairwell. There was no sink. There was no nothing. And they were eating in the gym. They'd flip some tables down and the kids would eat in the gym. So again, I don't want people to think poorly of school meals. They're doing fabulous work. There's really
Ah.
good food being served all across this country. I would encourage people to go in and ask some questions about what is your infrastructure? How many hours of employees do you allow for the food service program? Do you allow them to get training? Who's running the show? It's only as good as the administration wants it to be
Mhm.
because we all follow the same rules. So a huge investment is what it would take, but we can start now. I'm not a naysayer. The Urban School Food Alliance, we sit down and say, what can we do? How do we get this going? How do we get this started? And that's first by getting some employees trained, by
Yeah.
picking bits and pieces of equipment that we can put in and that we
Mhm.
do have the power to plug in. Um, but people have to be a little bit lenient and they have to go in and explore what's there first before they criticize. But you'd be surprised how amazing some of this food is with very little equipment and room to do it in. It's the fresh fruit and vegetable bars that are in our schools across the country are amazing. And they're doing it with very little space, but definitely money. It takes money. And if you're going to have people preparing that food, you're going to pay more labor hours. You've got to have more
Mhm.
money. There's just no way to do it for the price that we have. But I like to say to people, don't naysay it. Let's start small. And what steps can we take to move forward? And then again, please put us at the table and have us part of that conversation.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
are,
I I
we're
also think it seems like, one huge thing that the Urban School Food Alliance does amongst its members is cross-pollination of like, "Hey, you're doing this cool thing, I can do this cool thing," or, "Oh, that makes me think about how we're doing that." Like, how much of that is happening amongst your members all the time?
We share best practices all the time. We have a monthly membership call. During COVID, they wanted it weekly just because we all had to figure out how to do that.
Yeah,
But
really.
we have a monthly membership call. We have 2 face-to-face meetings a year where they share best practices and we go see one of their facilities.
Mhm.
All of our best practices are on our website free of charge for anyone in the general public to download and use and to look at. So that is it. And one thing in self-op, in particular, school nutrition programs, we can share ideas. We're not in competition with one another. We want it, as I said in the beginning, we want it to be good in all schools because when they gather at the baseball game, I don't want anybody to talk about how bad their school meal is. I want them all to talk about how good their school meals are,
Yeah,
right?
we
So,
want lunch lady to be the favorite person at school.
absolutely, I want them to understand how professional this is
Mm.
and that we're very serious and we're the largest restaurant in town. Now, with the scratch cooking, another project that we're just starting to work on, There's also lots of people out there that want to sell equipment. So they're going to sell schools a bill of goods. You don't need stainless steel spice drop down boxes, and you don't need.
It's not.
We're looking at developing a manual for what does it take to just start a small scratch cooking kitchen. What's the bare minimum for about 5,000 meals? What, and you can
Yeah.
scale it up and down then. But what are the things you want to look at? The power, the door, the flow of the work,
Yeah.
and so we're looking at developing a manual to put out there for people that want to start scratch cooking. Where do you start? And how do
And
you
also,
start?
I also think too about like procurement, right? Like there are a couple restaurants in my neighborhood, unfortunately, that have been closing, and they have equipment auctions. Like you can probably get a steal on some of this stuff as long as make sure that it works and make sure it meets those requirements. Like you don't have to go directly to a fancy schmancy vendor.
That's
You can
right.
probably get some of this at an auction,
You're right.
or like your restaurant supply store, a couple towns over, for not that, or for a much more reasonable cost, right? So you've got options there.
Yeah, in my high school, in that first district, when we first started remodeling and trying to do things different in that high school, there was a taco restaurant that went out of business, and I got their booths for free because they were out on the street corner. And I asked them, "Can I have the booths?" They said, "If you haul them away, they're yours." Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, my high school kids loved it. The same thing with going to food shows and equipment shows. People go to food shows and only worry about food. Go and learn about equipment. And
Mhm.
in my small rural district, we had one of the first combi ovens, they called them. It's combination, oven. Um, and they're very expensive, but I got a scratch and dent because it was at a food show. It had a dent on the side. They gave me the same warranty and they shipped it to my school district. All I had to pay was the shipping to the district from the show.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
then because there was nobody in the area that repaired them, because you have to be careful of that, I don't want to pay 3 hours for somebody to come for a repair.
Oh, right.
They said to me, "If you make this a showcase school and you let us train local people to repair them," and so our local folks that were doing equipment repairs for restaurants and schools, we then became the repair training site.
Hmm.
They extended my warranty to 5 years. So there was
Which
lots
is
of
unheard
ways
of.
it's lots of ways to play this game, but you can't stand back and say, "Woe is me." You have got to step forward and say, "All right, here I am. I'm not going away. I'm going to learn everything I can to make it the best for my district and my student customers." And then it's
Absolutely.
successful.
Well, you reference Isaiah, but I'm about to ask you a question from a different book of the Bible, and that is about your kind of David and Goliath experience with your Boost the Roost pilot. So Urban School Food Alliance recently, you're extending it now, but you closed out a 2-year pilot mode, where you, a nonprofit organization, launched your own no antibiotics ever NAE chicken product to be used in school districts around the country. So tell us some of what you and the Alliance learned during this project. And I want the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Okay. Well, let's start with the ugly. We'll end with the good, right? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ugly is the resistance to change is amazing.
Mm.
We had no idea that there would be so much resistance to this. So, there are companies that service the school nutrition marketplace. There are some very large ones that have kind of a dominant a place in the school nutrition marketplace. And you go to a food show and they show you some products and they say, pick one. And we decided, no, no more. We don't want to be subject to the marketplace anymore. We want to drive the marketplace. And we went chicken. We were collecting procurement data. Chicken is the largest protein item purchased across the country in school districts. The Alliance alone purchases 40 million pounds of chicken. The districts do collectively, collaboratively
A year.
a year. So we know we can change a system if we could get together. That's what the Alliance is, right? Changing the
Yeah.
system, transforming school meals. And so we set out to do chicken. And we were working with the George Washington uh, antibiotic, Antibiotic Resistance Center. That's how we learned about all of this. And in a lot of processes, the chicken is inoculated with the egg, with antibiotics. There are so many chickens in such a small space, and it's so horrible on the animal. And so they have to give them antibiotics in their feed and constantly giving them, they have antibiotics nonstop through their growth process. Now, there is research that's showing, and it's up and coming research as well, in the Antibiotic Resistance Center saying, wait a minute, No, this is too much antibiotic. Is that why we're becoming resistant to antibiotics, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's
And that's
this
a
whole
big
question going on.
human health concern.
Absolutely.
Right.
So we talked to some pediatricians, we talked to some endocrinologists who all said, look, there's some science that's beginning to emerge that we need to start at least thinking about this. And so we know that there's chicken when you go in the grocery store. You can buy regular chicken over here for $1.99. You can buy chicken over here and it says antibiotic free ABF, and it's probably $3.99. And of course, you think you're doing better, so you're going to buy that. Well, in the United States of America, at a certain point in time before butchering, that chicken has to stop getting antibiotics. It's required by law. So that labeling is factual, but it's fooling you. It's making you pay $2 or more for chicken
Right.
for per pound. So we learned all of this. We learned more about chicken we ever cared to learn about. But NAE means never antibiotic ever. And that's what you want to see on the label. That means, number one, the animal has to be treated well because you can't possibly never give it antibiotics if you cram it into a small space.
Right.
Free range is a joke. Free range
So
means there's a cat door in a great big pole barn, and whether the chicken can get to it or not is not their problem. But if the door is
sure does.
there, they can call it free range. So that's another
Right.
joke. So we set out for NAE,
So,
never
and
antibiotic.
not to stop you too much, but this is not only a human health standard potentially, but also an animal welfare standard, right?
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. So, so we set out for NAE. So we hired a company that does research and design for like Denny's and Applebee's, the chain restaurants. And that's what they do for a business.
Yeah,
And so
they product design.
product design, correct. And so we took three of our school chefs, three school dietitians, and they together worked with this company to come up with our own specification for a breaded chicken product that was NAE and also all kinds of other prohibited ingredients are not needed. We don't need all this. It's just cheap junk they're adding to our food supply.
You're sounding like a certain HHS secretary all of a sudden.
You're right. That's my next job, HHS
Yeah.
secretary.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. We're
anyway,
nominating you.
so we really went off on that. We really went forward on this and we were strong and supportive. So we wrote this specification. We then we went out and so we were said to, we put it out. We used we don't do any buying. So we used a food co-op out of Texas and they did the bid. They put it out on the street for a bid. And a very large company came back and really tossed their legal team at us over and over and over again. We were supposed to make a half a penny a case on this pilot. And because of the legal team we had to use at the co op, we lost the $200,000 we were going to make on the project. But we kept moving forward. It almost got thrown out, but well, we survived. We kept fighting, kept fighting, kept fighting. And finally, this company said, oh, no, we don't like this. We're going to change this. I finally pulled the plug and said, no, look, you've had it. You have to sign the non-disclosure. And if you don't sign it, then you're done. You're out. And they said, oh, that's not fair in competition. I said, yes, it is. You've had plenty of time. We delayed the project 3 months for you. And it was all this legal back and forth. And then they came back and said, well, the non-disclosure has July's date on it. It's August. Let our attorneys send you a new one with the right date. I said, I wasn't born yesterday. No, you sign mine or we're done here. Okay. So they did. Well, then we're starting to hear, and we had a lot of people on a pre-bid meeting because we wanted small processors to be able to get involved in the school nutrition program.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they could, and we did all different size districts all around the country, and we had 1.5 million pounds of chicken. People could bid one single district if they chose to. They could bid a region of the country or the whole country, just to
Mhm.
see if smaller processors would like to get involved in the business.
Sure.
Well, we had a bunch of people come to our pre-bid meeting and were very interested. And by the end, they had all fallen off. And we began to ask questions. And when you've been in the business 40 years like I have, people like to tell you what's going on. And I can get news from
Mhm.
people. And we began to hear that they were hearing things like what we were doing was illegal. Nobody wants to do business with you. Hey, look, I give you your corner of the chicken market. Be careful what you get involved in. She's going to ruin the whole process. She's going to get rid of all the brokers and salespeople. Yeah, on and on and on and on.
Seems like some people are scared of competition, huh?
Well, they don't like change, right? Too bad we kept going. Well, a small company did excuse me, did win the bid. This bigger company sent in a product, but it was an alternative product. We denied it. And this smaller company then did the bid and did the product. Okay, we won that battle. So we're getting it delivered, but now the distributors are you cannot believe how deep this is. The distributors now, the people that deliver the food are saying to us, we're not bringing in a new product. I got agreements with these other companies. And all of where we had enough volume around the country, the district said, "Oh yeah, part of your bid to us is that you'll bring in a new product. This is a new product, bring it in." So they did. But in the Midwest, we didn't have enough volume, even though we had Minneapolis and Cincinnati and a lot of small districts in Wisconsin. The distributors we couldn't get anybody to bring it in because they had agreements with these big manufacturers. And so I called the company we were working with and I said, "Hire me a fleet of trucks
Yeah.
because I'm delivering that chicken." So we
Yes.
did. And that's where it almost fell off because we needed more money. And then the Lifetime Foundation out of Minneapolis heard about it, said, "Hey, look, take this across the finish line. We love what you're doing. We'll help fund it." Gave us a grant to keep it moving because we're all grant funded, but we don't take money from these big manufacturers.
Exactly.
So we did it. By golly, we did it and got it done. Now we have heard more and more processors said to us, "Oh, this really did work. Everything is cool. We want to be a part of it." We're super excited that 2 processors now are doing NAE chicken to the USDA food system, so
Which is even bigger.
they can use entitlement dollars, their USDA foods money, their commodity money for it. Because that's what I tried to do when I was at USDA, but they wouldn't bid it. They wouldn't bid NAE chicken. So, but now it's available, and that's the only chicken they're getting from these 2 processors is this NAE chicken. And this big
Mhm.
company who decided they weren't going to do NAE anymore and lost a couple of our districts, they said, "What are you going to do about it?" Our district said, "Fine, you broke your contract. We're not buying your chicken." And they didn't. Well, now we've heard they're coming back to NAE. So we have moved the needle. I got very gray hair over it. I told my husband, if you see a cement truck around the ponds, look in the pond. I might have cement shoes on um, because it was very, very hard to move this industry. And we couldn't believe how embedded all the different players were and
Mhm.
how 1 or 2 companies really own the system. It's unbelievable. But we're proud of it. We did it. We have a whole marketing plan now called Boost the Roost. We ran around the National School Nutrition Association show this last summer with Boost the Roost t-shirts. And the back said, "Ask me about clean label chicken in schools."
Mhm.
And so now we're trying to take it to the next level and get more and more people to buy NAE chicken. So we're really excited. We're pushing this up.
Now, I know we're beyond time, but I've got a couple of brief follow-up questions. First off, where do we get our own Boost the Roost t-shirt? Can the general public just get one so we can brag about you?
I have to plug in here. I will have to let you know that because we were giving them away at our booth at the National School Nutrition Association. But who knows? We could probably we're looking at doing something here to get this marketing plan going, and I've just applied for a couple of grants to really get this marketing plan going. We want everybody to be wearing these t-shirts, so you never know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. But also, I think between your NAE experience and also you talked about the banned ingredient lists, even though school nutrition is, there's not enough money in it. There's a lot of, scrappy, folks trying to do their best on tiny margins. What I'm hearing from you is that school nutrition, not only is it a vital public health program and a food as medicine program and a nutrition education program, it also has a vast amount of market power and markets have a lot of influence over it, right? I mean, this program is so important not only to the future of our kids, but also a lot of our food system and our food economy. Is that right?
I absolutely. I mean, when you think of the Urban School Food Alliance, those districts alone, we have 19 members right now and growing. When you think about them purchasing 40 million pounds of chicken, if every one of them puts that spec on their bid and requires NAE chicken, never antibiotics ever, that's going to change the chicken market because everybody else is going to get that chicken. We're the
Yeah.
biggest volume there is in the country, bigger than any restaurant.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. It can be the game changer. It can be what changes the food system for sure.
Hmm. Well, on that note, one final question. You recently announced that you will be retiring at the end of this year. Um, what I mean, with 9 months left, there's still so much left to do in this field. What's your, top 3 to-do list items so that way you can actually, maybe get some relaxation and hang out with the grandkids and retire?
Well, procurement is a big issue. We have a grant that from USDA that's ending in September. And at the end of the grant, what we will be doing after our 3 years of work in procurement is writing a new business plan for school food procurement. We know that the rules at the federal, the state, and the local level are not meant for food, and certainly not meant for fresh local food. And
Mm.
so we will be proposing, and this has been my passion for 40 years is procurement, but we will be proposing a new business plan for school food procurement to USDA, to Congress. Hopefully, states will adopt it and people will start thinking about what it takes to purchase really good food um, instead of just the lowest price. This lowest price nonsense has to stop. So that's my number one big one. The second one, of course, is this whole chicken project. I took it on. I knew it would be hard. I didn't know it was going to be this hard, but I knew it would be hard. But we were successful, and now I want to see it. I want to see every single specification for chicken be NAE. I want to see that that's the norm in school meals, that we stop serving all these antibiotic, things that have been fed antibiotics their entire life to our children. And the science will continue to grow, but I can't believe the science won't show that that's not a healthy way to raise an animal, nor is it
Right.
a healthy way to eat. And again, and the third thing is I've worked very tirelessly to raise the level of professionalism. I want to empower school nutrition employees, not just during a crisis. They were the community when COVID hit. They were out there on the front line. They didn't stay home. They were out there
Yeah.
and they were
Yeah.
serving food and we were figuring it out. And we were pushing back at USDA and saying, we need to send a week's worth of food home. They shouldn't have to come every day. And, all of that. It was the Urban School Food Alliance that got USDA to send out a waiver so that now during Ramadan and other religious observances that we can send food home to kids rather than them being in the school building. And so I just want school meals to raise up to be a part of that community the way it should be because it's been there since the 1800s, serving children of all income levels, not just low income, but all income levels, and empowering them to do well in the classroom. So we serve a vital role in that school building.
Well, and in the community beyond the school building.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Dr. Olson, thank you so much for all I mean, we could probably go another hour, but I think both of our phones are gonna die. But thank you so much, not only for your decades of work on this issue, but for joining us at Food Policy Debrief today. Um, we hope to maybe we'll have you again, for a live retirement party or something like that, where you can be even more, speak with even more candor. Not that you didn't today.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me. I love this topic. It's my passion.
Of course. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.